December 1941. The world is ablaze. Nazi Germany dominates Europe. Imperial Japan strikes Pearl Harbor. America enters the greatest conflict in human history, and it needs weapons, fast. In the factories of Detroit, in the industrial heartland of America, a legend is being born, not from careful planning or innovative design, but from necessity, pragmatism, and the sheer industrial might of a nation at war. This is the story of the M4 Sherman Tank, America's iron beast that would roll across North Africa, storm the beaches of Normandy, liberate Europe, and fight across the Pacific. A tank that would be loved, hated, praised, and cursed. A tank that would define American armored warfare for a generation. This is the story of 50,000 iron warriors and the men who rode them into hell. To understand the Sherman, we must first understand the crisis that created it. In 1940, America's tank force was a joke. While German panzers crushed Poland and France, American soldiers trained with trucks marked tank in chalk. The Army's best tank, the M2 medium, was obsolete before it left the drawing board. Thin armour, a 37 mm pop gun, and a design that belonged in World War I. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, German Panzer IIIs and I-4s demonstrated what modern armoured warfare looked like. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, combined arms tactics that shattered armies in weeks. The US Army Ordnance Department knew they had a problem. They needed a medium tank, something heavier than a light tank but mobile enough for exploitation. They needed it reliable, mass-producible, and they needed it yesterday. Enter the M3 medium tank, quickly nicknamed the Lee by Americans and Grant by the British. It was rushed into production in 1941 as a stopgap measure. With its 75 mm gun mounted in a side sponson and a 37 mm in a tiny turret on top, it looked like a rolling apartment building. The M3 Lee would buy time, but everyone knew it was a compromise, a placeholder. America needed something better. In early 1941, while the M3 was entering production, Army Ordnance was already designing its replacement. The specification was simple. Take the M3's chassis and suspension, but put the 75 mm gun in a fully rotating turret. The result was the T6 medium tank. After trials and modifications, it was standardized as the M4 medium tank in October 1941. But it would need a name. The British, who would receive thousands under Lend-Lease, christened it Sherman after Civil War General William Tecumseh Sherman. The name stuck. The Sherman's design philosophy was revolutionary in its simplicity. Make it good enough, make it reliable, and make tens of thousands of them. The Sherman wasn't built around cutting-edge technology. It was built around American industrial capacity. Its engine, available. Its transmission, proven. Its tracks, reliable. Its gun, adequate. Everything was chosen not for maximum performance, but for maximum production. The basic M4 stood about 9 feet tall, weighed 30 tons, and was powered initially by a Continental R975 radial aircraft engine, producing 400 horsepower. It could hit 25 to 30 miles per hour on roads and had a range of about 120 miles. Its main weapon was the M375 mm gun, firing a 15-pound shell. The turret housed 3 men, commander, gunner, and loader. The driver and assistant driver sat in the front hull. Armour was 2 inches thick on the front hull, sloped at 56 degrees for better protection. The turret had about 3 inches. Not heavy by German standards, but adequate against most threats in 1942. What made the Sherman truly special wasn't its design. It was America's ability to build them. In July 1942, President Roosevelt set an impossible goal: 45,000 tanks by the end of 1943. The automobile industry responded. Detroit, the Motor City, became the Tank City. 11 major manufacturers produced Shermans: Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, American Locomotive Company, Baldwin Locomotive Works, Lima Locomotive Works, Pacific Car and Foundry, Federal Machine and Welder, Pressed Steel Car Company, Pullman Standard, and Fisher Body. The Fisher Body plant in Grand Blanc, Michigan, known as Tank Arsenal, became the largest tank production facility in history. At peak production, a new Sherman rolled off the line every hour. The production numbers are staggering. From 1942 to 1945, America produced 49. 234 Sherman tanks of all variants, plus thousands more chassis used for other vehicles. To put this in perspective, Germany produced about 6,000 Panthers and 1,300 Tigers during the entire war. America was building more Shermans in 2 months than Germany built Panthers in 2 years. This wasn't just quantity, it was logistics. Shermans were shipped to Britain, the Soviet Union, China, Free France. They fought in every theatre, every climate, every condition. November the 8th, 1942, Senuni. Operation Torch, American forces land in North Africa. The Sherman goes to war. The first Shermans to see combat belonged to the British 8th Army at the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. 300 Shermans joined Montgomery's offensive against Rommel's Afrika Korps. Against the German Panzer III and early Panzer IV, the Sherman proved superior. Its 75 mm gun could penetrate German armour at combat ranges. Its reliability in desert conditions exceeded the British Crusaders and Valentines it replaced. But North Africa also taught the Sherman's first hard lessons when Shermans met the German Tiger fast for the first time in Tunisia in early 1943. Crews discovered a terrifying truth. Their 75 mm shells bounced off the Tiger's frontal armour like tennis balls. The Tiger's 88 mm gun could destroy a Sherman at ranges where the Sherman couldn't even scratch the Tiger's paint. At the Battle of Sidi Bouzid in February 1943, German Tigers and Panthers devastated American tank battalions. But American tankers learned quickly. If you couldn't kill a Tiger from the front, you didn't fight it from the front. You used numbers, flanking manoeuvres, and coordinated tactics. 5 Shermans might lose 2 tanks, but they'd kill the Tiger. The Sherman's advantages became clear. Reliability. The Germans might have better tanks, but half of them were broken down. Shermans kept running. By May 1943, North Africa was won. The Sherman had proven itself in combat, flawed but effective. The Sherman wasn't one tank, it was a family. As production ramped up, variants multiplied to solve different problems and adapt to changing needs. The original M4 had a welded hull. The M4A1 had a cast-rounded hull, easier to produce. The M4A2 used twin GM diesel engines. Most went to the Soviets via Lend-Lease. The M4A3 used the Ford GAA V8 engine, eventually becoming the preferred version. The M4A4 had a lengthened hull for a Chrysler multibank engine, 30 engines in one. Then came the specialized versions. The British created the Sherman Firefly, mounting the powerful 17-pounder gun that could kill Tigers, only 1 per troop, but lethal when it mattered. The M4A3E2 Jumbo Sherman sacrificed speed for armour, up to 6 inches thick. Only 254 were built, but they led assaults where regular Shermans would be suicide. The duplex drive. DD Sherman could float, using a canvas flotation screen and propellers. These would swim ashore on D-Day. Flame tanks, mine flails, bridge layers, recovery vehicles. The Sherman chassis became a Swiss Army knife of armoured warfare. June 6, 1944. The largest amphibious invasion in history. Shermans lead the way. On Omaha Beach, 32 DD Shermans are launched 6,000 yards offshore into rough seas. 27 sink, drowning their crews. Only 5 reach the beach. On Utah Beach, conditions are better. 28 of 32 make it ashore. But once ashore, Shermans prove their worth. They're the only armour available to support the infantry pinned down on the beaches. Their 75 mm guns blast German bunkers and strongpoints. Without Shermans, D-Day might have failed. Then comes the nightmare of the bocage, the hedgerows of Normandy. Ancient earthen walls, topped with thick vegetation, divide the countryside into tiny fields. Perfect for defence, terrible for tanks. Shermans crawl through lanes between hedgerows, blind to what's ahead. German Panzerfaust teams wait in ambush. The Sherman's tall profile, designed for good visibility, now makes it a target. Its narrow tracks struggle in the mud. And then there are the Panthers and Tigers. In the open country around Caen, German armour mows down Sherman battalions. At Villers-Bocage, British tankers in Shermans and Cromwells run into SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann in his Tiger. In 15 minutes, he destroys 14 tanks and 15 other vehicles. The Americans invent the Rhino or Kulin hedgerow cutter. Steel teeth welded to the front of Shermans, made from German beach obstacles. Now Shermans can punch through hedgerows instead of climbing over them. By August, Operation Cobra breaks out of Normandy. Patton's Third Army races across France. Shermans prove their real advantage, operational mobility. German Panthers might win tank duels, but they break down every 150 kilometres. Shermans keep rolling. The Sherman was a death trap. Ask any veteran, you'll hear stories. Crews called it the Ronson lighter. Lights first time, every time. The Germans called it the Tommy Cooker. The problem was simple: gasoline and ammunition. Early Shermans stored ammunition in sponsons on the hull sides. When penetrated, they often caught fire. The gasoline engine was another fire hazard. When a Sherman was hit by a German 88 mm or 75 mm gun, the penetrating shell often ignited ammunition or fuel. Crews had seconds to escape. Many didn't make it. Tank commanders called it brewing up. Statistics paint a grim picture. In Normandy, the US Army estimated that a Sherman knocked out in combat had a 50 chance of burning. Crew casualties were horrific. Roughly 70% of tank crews who were casualties were killed, compared to about 30% for infantry. Lieutenant Belton Cooper, in his controversial memoir Death Traps, described scenes of burned-out Shermans with crews still inside. His account, while disputed in some details, captures the terror of fighting in an under-armoured, undergunned tank against superior German armour. But here's a complicated truth. The Sherman wasn't uniquely deadly compared to other tanks. German tanks burned too. Panthers had terrible engine fires. Soviet T-34S were coffins when hit. British Cromwells carried gasoline and burned spectacularly. What made the Sherman seem worse was that Americans were often the attackers, facing dug-in German defences with superior guns. Attackers always take higher casualties, and critically the US Army learned. In early 1944, they introduced wet stowage, ammunition racks surrounded by water jackets. This simple change dropped fire rates from 50% to about 15%. They also moved ammo storage to the hull floor, away from side penetrations. Sherman crews became experts in survival. They piled sandbags on hulls for extra protection. They welded spare tracks on as improvised armour. They learned to fight smart, never advance alone, always use infantry support, hit the enemy from flank and cover. The Sherman had flaws, serious ones, but calling it simply a death trap ignores the complexity of armoured warfare and the solutions American tankers developed. By late 1944, the Sherman's 75 mm gun was obsolete. It couldn't reliably penetrate the frontal armour of Panthers or Tigers. Something had to change. The US Army had known this for a year. In 1943, they tested the T-23 medium tank with a 76 mm gun. It had better penetration than the 75 mm, but there were problems. First, the 76 mm gun had worse high-explosive performance against infantry and fortifications, the Sherman's primary job. Second, crews had to be retrained. Third, the Army was already producing 2,000 Shermans a month. Changing production would slow delivery. So the 76 mm Sherman didn't arrive in numbers until after D-Day. When it did, it disappointed. The 76 mm could penetrate a Panther's side armour, but still struggled with frontal armour at normal combat ranges. Against Tigers, it was almost useless frontally. What American tankers really wanted was the 90 mm gun from the new T-26 Pershing heavy tank. But the Pershing wouldn't arrive in Europe until February 1945, and only 20 saw combat. The British had solved this problem with the Sherman Firefly and its 17-pounder gun. This weapon could kill Panthers and Tigers reliably, but it was British only, and only issued one per troop of 4 tanks. So American Sherman crews learned tank-killing tactics, use smoke to close range, flank the enemy, hit them in the sides and rear where armour was thinner, call in artillery or tank destroyers, never fight fair. The Sherman's real answer to Panthers wasn't a bigger gun. It was combined arms warfare. Infantry, artillery, air support and tank destroyers worked together. The Sherman's job was exploitation and infantry support, not tank duelling. Under Lend-Lease, America sent 4,102 M4A2 Shermans to the Soviet Union. Soviet tankers had strong opinions about them. Compared to the T-34, the Sherman had advantages: better ergonomics, more reliable radios, a turret basket, better visibility, and superior build quality. Soviet crews appreciated the comfort and ease of operation. But the Sherman had critical flaws for the Eastern Front. Its narrow tracks gave higher ground pressure than the T-34, meaning worse performance in mud and snow. Its gasoline engine was a fire hazard and required high-octane fuel, which was scarce in Russia. Soviet tankers nicknamed it Grave for Six Brothers or Burning Grave. The tall profile made it an easy target in the flat steppes. The armour was inadequate against German 88 mm guns. Still, the Soviets used them. They were better than nothing, and Soviet doctrine emphasized mass and momentum over individual vehicle quality. Many Soviet Shermans served in Guards tank units, a sign they were valued. The most famous Soviet Sherman belonged to Dmitry Lavrinenko's unit, though he himself was killed before receiving them. Soviet ace Alexander Burda commanded a Sherman, destroying 31 German tanks. Ultimately, the Soviets preferred their own T-34-85 when it became available in 1944, but Lend-Lease Shermans filled a critical gap in 1943 to 1944. December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes. Hitler's last gamble in the West. three German armies smash into the American lines. Panzer divisions spearhead the attack, Tigers, Panthers, and even the monstrous King Tigers. American units, many green and resting, are overrun. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne is surrounded. At Saint-Vite, American defenders delay the German advance for critical days. Sherman tanks fight desperate holding actions in freezing conditions. On December 26th, Patton's Third Army, led by Sherman tanks, breaks through to relieve Bastogne. It's one of the greatest feats of military logistics in history. Patton wheels his entire army 90 degrees and attacks north in days. The Shermans prove their worth not in tank duels but in mobility. German Panthers and Tigers, technically superior, run out of fuel. The Luftwaffe is absent. American air power, once the weather clears, devastates German columns. By January 1945, the Bulge is pushed back. German losses are irreplaceable. The Sherman's reliability, backed by American logistics and air power, wins the day. March 1945. The Allies cross the Rhine. Germany is dying but fighting with fanatical desperation. Shermans spearhead the advance into Germany. City fighting is brutal. Panzerfaust teams lurk in rubble, each corner a potential ambush. But Sherman crews have become veterans. They work with infantry, suppress positions with machine gun and 75 mm fire, and push forward. The Ruhr pocket is encircled. Army Group B, 300,000 German troops, surrenders. Sherman tanks race across Germany, liberating concentration camps and overrunning scattered resistance. On the Elbe River, American Shermans meet Soviet T-34s. Two different philosophies of tank design, both successful in their own ways, representing the alliance that defeated Hitler. May 8, 1945. VE Day, Germany surrenders. The Sherman has fulfilled its mission in Europe. Final tally. American and Allied Shermans helped defeat the most powerful army in European history, not through technological superiority, but through numbers, reliability, logistics, and the courage of the men who crewed them. While Shermans fought in Europe, they also waged a different war across the Pacific. In the jungles and islands of the Pacific, the Sherman faced a different enemy. Japanese tanks, the Type 95 Hago and Type 97 Chi-Ha, were no match for the Sherman. The 75 mm gun could destroy them easily. The real enemies were jungle, terrain, and Japanese infantry. On Tarawa in November 1943, Shermans supported Marines in the bloody assault. Only a few got ashore, but their firepower was critical in reducing bunkers. Saipan, June 1944. Shermans of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions faced the largest Japanese tank attack of the Pacific War. On the night of June 16th, 44 Japanese tanks attacked. American Shermans and artillery destroyed them all. It was a massacre. Iwo Jima, February 1945. Sherman tanks equipped with flamethrowers, Zippos, burn out Japanese positions in caves and pillboxes. The volcanic ash clogs engines and tracks, but Shermans keep fighting. Okinawa, April-June 1945. Shermans faced dug-in Japanese defenders, kamikazes, and the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. They support infantry through 3 months of hell. The Sherman proved ideal for the Pacific, reliable in tropical conditions, powerful enough to destroy any Japanese armor, and versatile enough to handle bunkers, infantry, and fortifications. When the atomic bombs ended the war in August 1945, Sherman sat ready for the invasion of Japan that never came. The Sherman's war didn't end in 1945. When North Korea invaded South Korea in June 1950, Shermans went back to war. The North Koreans attacked with Soviet-supplied T-34-85S, superior to the original T-34. The outnumbered and outgunned South Koreans and Americans fell back, but when M4A3E8 Shermans with 76 mm guns arrived, the tide turned. At the Battle of the Pusan perimeter, Shermans blunted North Korean armor attacks. Shermans remained in US service until the M46. Patton arrived in numbers, but they continued serving Allied nations for decades. Israel used Super Shermans with French 75 mm or 105 mm guns through the 1960s and early 1970s, fighting in the 1956 Suez Crisis, the 1967 Six-Day War, and even the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Other nations, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, operated Shermans into the 1990s. The last Sherman in combat service was retired in 2018 by Paraguay, 76 years after the first M4 rolled off the assembly line. So what do we make of the Sherman, the death trap, the Ronson lighter, the tank that lost every duel but won the war? The truth is nuanced. The Sherman had serious flaws. Its armour was inadequate against late-war German guns. Its main guns struggled against heavy armour. Early models were fire-prone. Crew casualties were high. But the Sherman succeeded at its real mission, being the tank America needed, not the tank some wanted. It was reliable enough to fight thousands of miles from home, simple enough to be produced by the tens of thousands, versatile enough to be adapted to dozens of roles, and available when it mattered most. Germany built better individual tanks. The Panther was probably the best all-around medium tank of the war. The Tiger was feared on every battlefield, but Germany couldn't build enough of them, couldn't keep them running, and couldn't fuel them. The Sherman embodied American industrial might and pragmatic engineering. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and there were enough of them. In war, that often matters more than perfection. More importantly, the Sherman carried brave men into combat. The real heroes weren't the machines. They were the crews who fought in them, knowing the odds, facing superior enemy armour with courage and skill. They learned to use the Sherman's advantages: speed, reliability, numbers. They developed tactics that negated their disadvantages. They won. Today, Shermans stand in museums and memorials across the world. Some still run, restored by enthusiasts who keep history alive. They remind us of the industrial miracle that won World War II and the generation who drove those iron beasts through hell and came home to build the modern world. The M4. Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II, but it was the right tank, at the right time, built by a nation that could produce miracles when the world needed them most. This was America's Iron Beast, and its legacy echoes still.